is my pleasure to introduce Crystal Maggelet. Crystal Maggelet began her entrepreneurial career in 1993 when she founded Crystal Inn Hotels and Suites. That career was thrown for a shock when she was asked to rescue Flying J, the company her father founded, from bankruptcy. Through many difficult moments, she did rescue the company and paid off all of her creditors 100%. It is a story of incredibly ethical leadership. Crystal now serves as the president and CEO of FJ Management, which owns and operates Maverick, Big West Oil, and Tab, an industrial bank. Crystal attended USU when she was a member of Alpha Chi Omega. She also holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. She is a longtime member of the Huntsman School National Advisory Board and has supported scores of Aggies through an annual scholarship and through her support in creating the FJ Management Center for Student Success. She is a 2008 Distinguished Executive Alumnus of the Huntsman School and the recipient of an honorary doctorate from Utah State University. Please join me in welcoming Crystal Maggelet.
Thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's obvious from the introduction that I love Utah State. So I'm so pleased to be asked to be here tonight. And I was asked, I was given the title, Fueling Change with Strategic Leadership. And I thought, oh no, I am not a strategy kind of person. And so I went right to Wikipedia to understand what strategic leadership was. So strategic leadership, it said, Wikipedia knows all, right? The ability of influencing others to voluntarily make decisions that enhance the prospects for the organization's long-term success while maintaining long-term financial stability. Okay, well, I'm going to now speak kind of to this, maybe, and at the end of it, maybe you can tweet me whether you think I met this definition, but I'm going to tell you 3 real-life stories. They're my stories, and I hope through those stories that you will get a very good idea about how I feel about leadership and entrepreneurship. And I'm going to start first with kind of where I began. So this was my first home in Willard, Utah, not so far from here. There was a trailer, and you can kind of see it on the edge of the picture. That's where I was brought home in 1964. I had an amazing life. My dad was starting a company. He had a plane, and he would fly us off to Disneyland, and we'd stay at Motel 6. Life was really good. One brother, do you remember all the TV shows had like a boy and a girl and a mom and a dad? It was a great life in Brigham City, Utah. My first real job was at McDonald's. Actually, Dave Patel will tell me that's not true because I spoke at commencement, and my first job was in potato harvest when I was 13 years old in southeast Idaho pulling dirt clods. So that was, I guess, my first paycheck, but civilized, it was McDonald's. And I loved that I had this job and felt so proud that I was contributing to my own well-being. And I came to Utah State, as was mentioned. I loved Utah State. And, some of my best memories are walking up on a winter day with wet hair. You guys relate, right? You people out there, right? Girls and boys. Wet hair, frozen when you get to the business building. It's like, anyway, I love Utah State. That's pretty obvious. I was also fortunate enough to get a degree from Pepperdine. That's where I actually got my undergraduate degree. Although I have to say my heart is here. I only was at Pepperdine for a couple of semesters, but it was a great location. So my first office job was actually working for Flying J. I had no clue when I got out of college really how to get a job. And my dad ended up calling me one day after I'd spent 3 months trying to figure out how to get a job and said, there's an opportunity here at Flying J, you will report to work on Monday. And I was like, all right, because unfortunately I hadn't really figured out in college how to do that on my own. But I didn't really want to be at my dad's company at that point in my life, and so someone came to me and said, I was sort of saying, I'm back here in Utah. I'm still not ready to be in Utah probably. I want to do something productive. I don't have a clue how to get a job, really. I have some good work experience now. And somebody said, well, why don't you go get a business degree? And I thought, yeah, that's awesome. And I had the fortune to go back to Boston and visit Harvard Business School, and I stepped on campus and I thought, this is so cool. I want to come here. And I was lucky enough. I cared a lot about my grades in school, even though I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was fortunate enough to be accepted at Harvard Business School and was able to attend there, which was a great education. Just like the David Eccles School. It's great. I'm sorry, Huntsman. I just screwed up, didn't I? I had that on my mind, Huntsman. This is actually, you probably all know this, but John Huntsman's goal, and I've heard him say this, and they probably talk about this a lot here, but he really wants us to be like the Wharton of the West. That's his goal. And he wants affordable business education, which so I am very bad for not saying Huntsman, because it's amazing what John Huntsman's doing. The weekend, I had this weekend after I finished business school. I was actually working back east, and I was invited to a wedding. I went to the wedding, and it's pretty typical. I ended up, out of the wedding, I got a husband. It was a few months later, not a lot, but by the next year, I was married. But it wasn't just a husband that I got out of that wedding, because it was in Calgary, Canada. I was living back east, and my dad said, I've got an idea, and I think you'll be interested. When are you coming west? I said, I'm coming to this wedding. I'll fly through Salt Lake. And my dad had this idea. My dad really is a true entrepreneur in our family, and he had this idea to build a hotel. And he took me by this property, and it had 9 buildings on it at the time, and it was parceled all around these blocks. And my dad was a visionary, and he said, I think we should build a hotel right there, and I think that if you'd like to, it's an opportunity for you. And I said, hey, I'll do that. That's awesome. Now, I don't know, as I went through my speech so far, do you remember me saying I had any experience in hotels? Right? No, I did. I had experience staying in hotels. I had a sales job, and so I had stayed in a lot of hotels. And my dad had a friend he was a silent investor with, who had a mid-market type hotel, limited service it was called at the time, that was a great concept. And my dad said, you can go to Oregon and you can study this business for a month and then come back and let's build this hotel. And I was all game, and that's what we did. And we were very fortunate. Salt Lake needed hotel rooms at the time, so we had an immediate opportunity in front of us. What I had to kind of figure out on my own and think about is what sort of amenities we'd offer. What would we, at the time, this was the early 90s, would we serve breakfast? Would it be hot? Would it be cold? How large would our rooms be? What would our price be? What would we want to be kind of a bargain hotel? Or what, would we have voicemail in that day? Those sorts of things. And another big decision I had to make is, you don't see many independent, what I would call independent hotels. So you see Hampton Inn and Marriott Courtyard, and even today, you don't see many, what we were, and still are today, independent hotels. And that was a business decision we made because we didn't want to pay all the fees to be a franchise, and we felt like we could choose locations and have sales teams that would make up for that additional money we'd have to pay to be a franchise. So we opened the first Crystal Inn in 1993, and we very soon after that, Flying J had about 9 hotels, motels, and it didn't make sense for Flying J to keep managing them if we were going to start building hotels. And so my husband joined me, and we formed a management company called MacCall Management, and we brought on the Flying J hotels under our management as well. So suddenly we went from 1 hotel to 10 hotels very quickly. Oh, maybe it wasn't quite that many, actually. So Logan, in 1995, we broke ground on Logan, and this is where I bring in the family aspect, because as I was saying at dinner, where you are in your life, or maybe some of you are there, some are going to be there really soon, you do everything at once. Like that's just from 20 to 60, it's kind of like everything happens. So how that all overlaps, I don't know if you can tell, but I don't have a watermelon under that shirt, and I had our first child, and he learned to walk in the Logan Crystal Inn. So I have a fond place. It's not a Crystal Inn anymore, but anyway, we had our first child. We continued to open properties, and again, for some reason when I do these grand openings and things, I have another bump. Next day, literally next day, there's another one, right? So we're building hotels, we're having kids, and we want more of everything, so then there were 2 more. So between 1993 and 2002, and Dave, you have to get my numbers right, but we ended up, we had 14 hotels and 4 children. We were located coast to coast because we had a hotel in Maryland, we had a hotel in California. It was a great business, and it was 2002-ish at that point, and we got looking at it, and during the same time we'd been building and growing like crazy, so had the rest of the world in this particular segment of limited service lodging. And so we made a decision that we would step back. Our kids were really little. We had 4 kids at that point, 7 and under. And we decided we would devote, my husband and I were in the business together, we decided we would devote time to our family and we would wait out the next opportunity to build more hotels. We had a great management team. Dave DeYoung is here today. He runs our hotel business. He was part of our management team then. And we sort of stepped back from growing and said, we don't want to grow and not be profitable, and it seems like the hotels are getting overbuilt. So I got diverted a little bit along the way, and we really have not grown the Crystal Inns anymore, but it's been a wonderful company for us. But today, as of last summer, we actually sold 4 hotels because as we looked at our hotels and the age of our hotels and the markets they were in, we needed to put capital in because they have my name on them, and I was going to have to put more dollars in, and the demand in those markets, there was so much competition that it didn't make sense. I didn't feel like it was a good business decision to put more capital into these hotels, and maybe that wouldn't have even been a good enough decision to sell, but it's such a seller's market, I think now and then for sure, that you could get a great price. So we made the decision to cut our hotels back, hoping and loving this industry that in the future we may look at lodging again. So I'm going to now talk a little bit about Flying J and what my father did with Flying J. So my dad actually saw an opportunity on the West Coast to build self-service stations. So he put up small kind of cinder block buildings. He hired retired couples, and they would live in these buildings. And in the day, they didn't have auto pay. The pumps, usually you had an attendant that would pump your gas, but they were trying to move away from that. So my dad built a unit that these people that were living in their home could flip on the pump just to clear it. They still had to come to the window to pay, but they could clear the pump and not have to walk out. And that was kind of one of the pioneers of self-service, and that's where Flying J got its start in 1967-68. Now, because he was building these self-service stations, he realized I might as well truck my own fuel, and so he bought some trucks and began to haul his own fuel. And then he thought, well, I'm selling fuel, so I might as well buy a refinery and make some fuel. People ask, actually, that we have Pilot Flying J's and Mavericks, and people will say, well, do you supply all those from your refinery? And the answer is no. We supply a very small part of our retail outlets from our own refinery. But nonetheless, Flying J then did exploration production. So by the early 80s, we were a fully integrated oil company, a small fully integrated oil company. We had exploration production through to retail outlets. And we were very proud about that. And in 1979, one of my dad's executives had a great idea to build a truck stop. And my dad, in my dad's entrepreneurial style, truck stops were awful along the interstates, and they were dirty, and nobody wanted to go into them, the traveling public. And my dad was a neat freak, and he wanted to build something he would be proud of, that he'd want to go in himself. He'd driven some trucks, and he knew what the greasy spoon truck stops were like, and he didn't want to have that. So he patterned the first truck stop the way he'd want it. And the first year it was built, even though it was on I-15, which is not a big trucking corridor, it was rated the 6th best truck stop in the whole country. So he knew that he'd landed on something that was unique, that could be different and become something big. He wanted to provide all the services for trucks. And so in the trucking industry, you have lots of different obstacles, and one of them was payment, and leasing and factoring, all these things that I won't go into. But we wanted to provide everything, so we actually started a bank called Tab and a credit card processing company called TCH, and they were all peripheral businesses, all about providing better services for the professional driver. And our truck stops got better and bigger and more what these drivers across the country would want, and we were building a very large network all across the country. And then in 2003, my father actually was tragically killed. He was a pilot, an avid pilot, and unfortunately he was killed in a plane crash. At that time, my dad had already stepped back from Flying J a bit, and a gentleman by the name of Phil Adams was running Flying J. And so even though, obviously I was very sad that my dad had died, but I felt that Flying J was in great hands with Phil Adams as president. And so I wasn't very worried. My kids by then were 3 to 8 years old, and I was involved in the Crystal Inn and doing other things. During that time, from 2003 to 2008, Flying J made 2 acquisitions which I believe were not core to what we did. They didn't have much to do with the truck stops, if anything. Yes, we had a few refineries, but Bakersfield, California was really kind of out of our market. They weren't really core. We didn't stick to our strategy of building a network of travel plazas across the country. And because of that, but it wasn't obvious when we made those acquisitions. As you can see, we were having tremendous growth. So to the outside public, and even to me as a stockholder and board member, there really was nothing to complain about, at least initially, by making these acquisitions. So what did I do at this time at Flying J? I was a member of the board of directors. We had a monthly management meeting where like 100 managers from all our different divisions would be there, and they would stand up and talk about what they did, and I would attend those every single month. We had around 12 divisions, and so one time a year I would meet with each division to hear what they were doing and kind of get to know the people in those different divisions. But I had absolutely no day-to-day responsibility at Flying J. And all of a sudden in 2008, December 2008, I start hearing rumblings that our $20 billion in sales company is running out of cash, and that we aren't going to be able to pay our crude bills for our refinery, and that we may have to declare bankruptcy. And I remember I was shopping for Christmas, and I got a call, and I had never even thought, like a month before that, it would have just been beyond me. I had heard some rumors, we had cash problems, but I still thought, okay, well, we'll get through this. But I had no idea really what was coming. And when our general counsel called me and said, Bank of America has asked who our bankruptcy counsel is. I'm like, what? Bankruptcy counsel? I know we had issues with cash, but this is crazy. But it was reality, and December 15th is when I heard about that. So I went into full gear. From that day forward, I wanted to save our family business, and I wanted to do it for our employees, I wanted to do it for our family, and I wanted to do it mostly for our creditors if we were going to have them. So I got on a plane with our past CFO and our current controller, and I went to New York City. It was the week of December 15th, 2008. A lot of years have passed since then, but for many of you, you maybe studied or know that that was not a time to go try to find money from banks in New York City, 2008. I was trying to raise $120 million, and it was a week before Christmas. I was not successful. So while I was there, though, someone had given me advice that I needed really top-notch legal counsel for the bankruptcy, and I was able to hire Kirkland & Ellis, which were great attorneys. And essentially I began to build a team from the sidelines that was going to take us through bankruptcy, of very smart people around me. I hired an attorney, I hired an investment banker, and eventually we hired a PR firm, all within that week, because On December 22nd, 1 week after I'd heard about bankruptcy, we went into what's called free fall bankruptcy. And when you're a company as large as Flying J was then, we were the 15th largest private company in the United States. You don't go into free fall bankruptcy. You know a long time in advance and you arrange with your creditors. So when you left Flying J on Friday, and some of you might know this because of where we are, because if people were impacted, you thought you had a solid job, you were going into Christmas, you probably understood there was maybe a recession looming, but when you came back Monday morning, you were taken into a meeting and told that Flying J had gone into bankruptcy. And you knew that and depending on what you were doing, you were going to be talking to a lot of people that day because all of a sudden we had no credit and we had retail facilities that had fuel and Coke and all kinds of stuff that we needed to keep supplied because if we didn't keep those facilities supplied, we would have to liquidate. We'd have nothing to sell and we couldn't keep our cash flow going. So it was amazing what our employees were able to do. And the 22nd, right before Christmas, they really helped to make sure Flying J kept running. The line in the sand was drawn. And so I basically was working alongside the management, and it kind of became clear that maybe we needed a new leader. And for me, it wasn't an easy decision, but a lot of the employees that ran those different divisions I talked about came to me and said, you've been here, you've been working day in, day out for the past 3 weeks, and we want, will you take on? And that's kind of all I needed because I wanted, more than anything, I wanted to pay people back for what we owed them, and I really wanted to save as many jobs as I could. And I didn't know if I felt that comfortable handing that responsibility off to somebody else. And so I just dove in. And I had the corner office. What's so bad about that? So what do? I had surrounded by very bright people at this point, and we had to pay a lot of money, but we hired really smart people. And they understood bankruptcy really, really well, and I did not. They also were very jaded about bankruptcy because most people don't pay people back 100%, and so they really saw they thought that was kind of a lofty goal and that was all cool, but Crystal, you'll never do it kind of thing. But nonetheless, they understood bankruptcy, so I really needed them around. Some of the things I did, I held a brainstorming session, and I invited all of these 100 people that came to our management division meetings and said, okay, what needs to go? We're doing all kinds of things that we don't need to do. We need to conserve cash. What needs to go? And it was a very successful way to bring in the team, help them understand the problem, help them be part of the solution, and we were able to get rid of quite a few cash draining type things. In that meeting, someone raised their hand and they said, we have to wear ties every day and it's so constraining, and what do you think? Could we lose ties? And I said, take them off. And literally that was in the morning, by that afternoon, there was not a tie on in that building. And that was like 6 weeks into the bankruptcy, and as small as that was an effort to build morale, to have people feel like I cared. And I think little things can go a long way. From the advisor standpoint, there were so many people, attorneys, investment bankers, around, and the creditors committee had their hired advisors. So there were all of these different groups that had different goals, and I felt like I needed to get a handle on what everybody was doing, and I did a very simple thing. I just had bi-weekly conference calls that everybody would get on and kind of report what they're doing, and so I could try to keep a handle on the decisions being made on our behalf at Flying J. And that was all good, and we're getting into the spring of the year and of 2009. Times are still not very good. I'm being told there's no stockholder value left in the company. The people that are willing to help us, because we are looking and going to need some cash, just want to own the business, and their deals are terrible, and I don't want to take it. And we're running out of cash because 3-day weekends, like Memorial Day, July 4th, when the bank wasn't open, because of the way we were paying our creditors every day, it didn't work. So we kept looking out in the future saying, okay, we're going to run out of cash, and we're going to be in trouble. So it was a very, very stressful time. We were able to sell the Longhorn Pipeline. It was from a restructure point of view, it was very clear to me what needed to be done. I wanted to sell the businesses that were losing money and keep the ones that were not. It was that simple. So it wasn't, it didn't take rocket science. And the Longhorn Pipeline was losing money, and I knew we needed to sell it. We successfully were able to sell it. We had a bid for $220 million. Our next closest bid was $30 million. I take no credit for pulling that off. I had great help around me, and they kept that $220 million number, which is amazing. So we had, a lot of toys at Flying J. And, I didn't feel so good in bankruptcy flying around the country on this. It's like, what? So I looked for all kinds of things to start selling. Exploration Production didn't lose money. It was a great little company. But the creditors said, you've got to sell this business. And in an effort to show them that I really did mean what I said, I was willing and put up Exploration and Production for sale. And we ended up, even in the time, getting a great price for it, which was really good. So someone from our competitor, Pilot, had been calling me throughout the whole time and wanted to meet with me, and we were in a lawsuit with him, and it's like, how am I supposed to trust you? But he was very persistent, and eventually I agreed to meet with him in June of 2009. We sat down at a restaurant in Salt Lake, and there was a paper tablecloth at the restaurant, and he began to tell me what he would do if the two companies were merged. And I had been at Flying J at that point for 6 months, and I knew the things that needed to be done to make us a better company. And I at the time also had a partnership with ConocoPhillips, and they weren't helping or allowing us to do the things we needed to do. And he articulated basically an amazing plan for our two companies being together. And I left that meeting knowing or feeling like we would definitely be able to pay people back and come out of bankruptcy and still have a great company, a great brand. And I was very encouraged. But then we got our deal and we went to the FTC in Washington, and the FTC didn't necessarily like that the first and second biggest truck stop companies in the country were going to merge. Even though there were 5,000 truck stops and we were only together 550, we were kind of clearly the 1 and 2. So we began working through the FTC issues. But there was a lot of pressure off of me because our creditors saw this solution would be a 100% payback solution, and it made them very happy and they were very appeased. In the meantime, our businesses kept making money. The very businesses we were going to merge with Pilot were producing cash that we were able to put away, as it was still ours, obviously. We signed the deal, but we really couldn't finish the deal off because, again, waiting for the FTC. And we were able to sell the Bakersfield refinery. We didn't get a lot of money for it, but it was really good to have it gone because it was costing us $3 million a month to just keep it kind of warm. We'd shut it down to some degree. It was a big deal to find a buyer for the Bakersfield refinery. North Salt Lake refinery, I wanted to keep. I had a plan that would allow us to keep the refinery. I didn't want to sell it. The very Bank of America, who had put us into bankruptcy, had now come back and were willing to refinance, not even a year later, refinance the refinery. And I knew we could keep it. We'd have a lot of debt on it, and I wanted to do that. But the creditors wanted me to sell everything. So I had to fight because I knew this was a great asset, and I knew we could pay people back and not sell it. And I really felt strongly I wanted to do that. So it's early 2010, things are going well, the businesses are operating well, we have plenty of cash. I get some executives together and I say, okay, we got to have a business plan without Pilot, without that transaction taking place. This takes people's minds off of the pending merger. Most of the Flying J employees did not like the idea of the merger because the operations were going to go to Knoxville, Tennessee, so the people in Ogden didn't really view it very favorably. Most of them were not very excited and hoped that it wouldn't happen. But it did. It all came together. We ended up having to invest 26 travel plazas. We got FTC approval. We closed on the Bakersfield refinery sale. And we exited bankruptcy in July 2010. We were able to pay everybody back interest. And it was a very successful bankruptcy, or whatever, reorganization. So, okay, now I've been at Flying J. It's 2010. So we paid 5,000 claims, about $1.9 billion back, which I thought the number when I started was 400 million. I didn't see this number until we actually had done this. I think it would have completely freaked me out how I was going to raise $1.8 billion. But anyway, it worked. And we actually came out, and this sounds funny, but because we wanted to pay everybody back and because of what the creditors believed we needed to have to do that, we came out with a lot of extra cash. And so I actually worked a deal with Pilot because I wanted to have as much ownership in Pilot Flying J as I could, that I would take a certain amount of cash out, but if I had leftover cash, I could buy back in, which I was able to do about a year later, which at the same price. So that was really great and was really nice for me to be able to do that. So July 2010, bankruptcy's over, advisors, smart people going away, right? Nobody around much anymore. Just, we still had a lot of employees at the main office, but all the smart advisors are going away. We own 17% of Pilot Flying J. We own Big West. We're able to push off selling that and to refinance it. So we have $370 million on Big West debt. We own the bank. We own 50% of the credit card processing company. And, life's pretty good. But what do we do now? This is kind of, we've got these businesses, and what's my role with Pilot Flying J? And I was on the board there, and I was helping to transition because of the merger. But we had these other businesses, and they were doing awesome, and they kept doing awesome. And one day I just thought, I got to get over the whole restructure thing. We got to have some strategy about what we're going to be, because we still got a lot of businesses. And I got some people together, and we came up with what is now our tagline and vision: building value to last. And that basically just means we want to have companies that are around for a long, long time, that employ people for a long, long time, for careers. It doesn't always mean that we won't sell things. Like I said, we sold some crystal ends. If we see that they're not building value to last, we probably will sell some things. But our main core businesses, we hope to have for a long, long time. And we also adopted our three guiding principles: integrity, mutual respect, and excellence. And I was still, so we're doing really well, and I'm figuring out what's next. Where is there a need? What can I do? And I happened to go to lunch with my cousin who owned Maverick. And we had talked about, right when we came out of bankruptcy, we had talked about merging our companies, or doing something together. But I just would go to lunch with him kind of once in a while. And in the beginning, in 1960, before my dad started his company, 1964, his father had been involved with his brother who started Maverick. So we were actually involved in Maverick. Our family had sold out in 1976. So my cousin was talking to me, and I was expressing to him that we were having great success and that we'd paid off all our debt for the refinery, and that the Pilot merger was going great, and we had a lot of cash. And he said, "Well, I'm thinking about selling Maverick." I said, "Sell it to me." And he did. And an amazing acquisition, an amazing brand, a very fun company. Very excited and happy to be a part of it, as well as the other companies that we have. But it's, and then, we're still sort of at FJ Management, where I'm CEO. I am still recreating what we are as the holding company of these companies, because as you notice, it's pretty lodging, and you saw the crystalline. It's very petroleum and lodging, and we want to make sure that as we go into the future, I want to, and I hope the business transitions to the third generation. I want to make sure that we're on top of petroleum phasing out. I don't know who knows when or what if, but I'd rather take some of while we're having great times, take some of the cash we're generating and start doing something else. So we actually do quite a few direct investments in small companies, and we're actually right now focusing a lot and looking at aging services and healthcare because it's so different than petroleum. But we're not going to go in wholehearted, big maverick size acquisition. We've got to learn the business first. So how I think about leadership, which is really what this all comes down to. And, I have about a bazillion books in my office on leadership, and people give me books all the time on business. And I have to confess, that is not how I learn, and I haven't read them. I haven't read any of them, actually, which is bad. But so what you see is really comes from my heart and my own experience, and it's how I lead. It's what I think about when I lead. Be confident and believe in yourself. And when I say that, I'm not talking about ego. And there is a huge difference. I won't name names in the political realm, but there's a lot of ego going on right now. Just saying. I think ego can be really dangerous, but confidence is not dangerous. You need to believe you can do what you want to do. Well, I don't know how this is coming out that way, but I don't know what's coming up next. Listening to your team. You heard in my story that I have constantly had people around me who were smarter than me, who gave me advice, who helped me, who said, hey, that's not right. We ought to do something else, or think about this. You have to, as a leader, have a team around you, and you have to recognize that you have a team, and you're a team, not an individual. Leave all your options open. If I hadn't gotten the education I did, if I hadn't gotten good grades, if I hadn't been willing to dive into situations where I had no experience at all, I wouldn't have been able to have these opportunities. I had to leave all of my options open. I had to believe I could do things. And watch for opportunities and prepare for them. Again, it's like they don't always come when you want them. Is it best timing for me to have kids 8 to 13 years old and 4 of them, and to dive into 60-hour work weeks and travel 100 nights a year? Not really the best timing. But that was the only time I was going to have the opportunity to save my family business. I couldn't say, wait a minute, stop everything. I want to wait. I want to do this in 5 or 10 years, not now, right? So you have to be ready when opportunities come along. Be decisive and take responsibility for your decisions. It's okay to make a mistake. We all make bad decisions. Everybody does. Don't say someone else made that decision, I didn't, when it goes wrong. Step up and say, you know what, I decided that, and it wasn't a good decision, and this is what I learned from it. But mostly, and this is the last point, work hard and always do the best you can. Because if you do that, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you work hard and you don't develop a huge ego, but you have confidence in yourself, I guarantee every one of you in this room is going to be a huge success. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Do we have questions?
We do.
All right, cool.
Well, Crystal, we're very grateful for your presentation.
Yeah.
Now we have a few questions from the crowd. Thank you for all those who have tweeted in. So the first one we have comes from our very own Braxton. And Braxton says, what do you contribute the recent success of Maverick to?
Cool. So I think that Maverick, the brand at Maverick is unbelievable. When we looked at buying Maverick, I understood Venture's first stop and was known, and there was a brand there, and we became very committed. They were already committed. Probably 7 to 10 years ago, the people, my cousins actually at Maverick, came up with the idea to do Venture's first stop. And when they came up with that idea, they started from the ground up. So they went to employees. They actually started with saying the home office was base camp. and they told all their employees they could dress in cargo shorts or jeans and, be very adventure-y. And they started doing all their advertising campaigns around not just like bicycle riding, but, dirt biking or rappelling or, adventure's first stop. And they were very diligent about that over the past 7 to 10 years. And they were already down the road and down that path. What I saw is that maybe they weren't as committed to older stores, because we had about 100 country stores, they were called, and we only had like 250 stores. So some of our stores, in fact, I'd even say at that point we purchased, the majority of our stores were not the cool adventures first stop with the snowboarder on the ceiling. And I really felt, unlike my predecessors, that these older stores needed to have the same image too. And so I hope that you, as our customers, have seen that we're upgrading what we do, and we really are very committed to our brand of Adventures First Stop and providing really a friendly, clean place for you to go, and hopefully products that you want when you are going on your adventures, even if that adventure is coming to school. So, we mostly want to be a convenient place for people, but I do think our brand does set us apart from our competition.
Thank you. And we want to thank Braxton for that question. Next comes from Colton, and Colton asks, what's the trick to successfully doing business with family?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think the only thing you can do is educate family. I think one of the biggest mistakes and be honest with each other. I think one of the biggest mistakes family make is successful families sometimes, for instance, won't tell their children things, and then all of a sudden something happens and stuff gets dumped on them, and they don't even realize that they had that, and they don't understand it. And I think that families need to educate, if they have a family business, kids from a very young age. I think that's really important to build stewardship. And then I just think being very, very honest with everybody involved. And, here in Utah, our family, we have a fairly small family, but Maverick, when we wrote like 72 checks to buy Maverick, there were 72 stockholders. And, people, when you get that many people, they don't all understand the business. And then that's really, in my opinion, why some family businesses eventually, third generation or so, that's one of the reasons people don't understand it. They want to sell it. They just want their money. Like, why have I gotten no return from this? So I really believe in bringing people along and being honest in family businesses.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and thank you, Colton, for that question. The next, Andy and a few others of us are curious. Is it true the Maverick being built at the mouth of the canyon in Wellsville will be the largest Maverick in the chain?
We have a few Mavericks like that, but not very many. It's probably in the top 10, I would say. Perfect. So it's having the diesel RV lanes, those extra islands out there. We don't have a whole lot that have that. So it'll be a really cool store for us, and we'll be very proud to have it here in Logan, for sure.
Now we all know where to stop on our way back home.
But I got to figure out if I get the right ethanol, clear fuel,
That's right.
That's 91 instead of 88. So anyway, that's a little inside story.
Perfect. And then this will be our very last question, and it's by Kenzie. And she is curious about what is the FJ Management's outlook and plan for alternative fuel vehicles and electric charging stations.
So we, a few years back, when gas was like $3.50, $4, we were much more focused on that, a lot like the rest of the country was. We put in some natural gas at basically our truck stops, actually, as well as our convenience stores. And in fact, Pilot Flying J they partnered with T-Boone Pickens, and there's 100 natural gas dispensing facilities at the Pilot Flying J's. The thing is, with fuel as inexpensive and crude oil as inexpensive as it is, and no real infrastructure for electric vehicles to be fueled and for natural gas vehicles, there's not a lot of motivation to move that along. So we don't really see much movement in that. And what I said even a year ago or 2 years ago when crude oil was higher and when there was more movement that way, I didn't want to be, honest, maybe right or wrong, I didn't want to be on the forefront of what it's going to be. Maverick will be there to provide whatever it becomes, but I don't want to be on the forefront putting electrical in and then natural gas and whatever else of the day. With 200 facilities, that's pretty costly to do it. And even Pilot Flying J, as I mentioned, partnered with TB and Pickens, and they put the majority of the money to put the 100 facilities across the country, which right now very few of them are open. They're basically shuttered. So I know there's a lot of people, I'm sure in the audience, they're like, that's not right, we want green, and I appreciate that, and that's why I want to look for other things to do outside of petroleum. But I think it's going to be quite a while, if prices stay low, before we see a lot of that green movement towards natural gas or electricity.
Perfect. Okay, well, before we let you go, we have one last question. I would feel bad if we skipped over Jordan, so this will be the last one for the evening. Jordan's wondering, when we were talking about bankruptcy, how much of the decision to not take out bankruptcy was motivated by ethics and morals?
Like to pay back everybody? Is that probably what you meant?
Jordan? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, because I just really, my dad had passed away, but he was such an ethical man with such integrity. It was like, there is no way, because our company can pay people back. And if I have to sell everything, we will do it to pay people back, because there's no way that I was going to cut deals and I was told, that's crazy. Like, why'd you pay everybody back? That's crazy that you did that. It's like, no, it's not. That was the right thing to do. So yes, my decision to do that was 100% because of integrity and ethics, and why I'm up here on the stage, because if I had cut a deal, regardless of if my ownership was more today or my net worth was more, I wouldn't be able to stand on the stage and talk to all you today, because I don't think that's what bankruptcy should be about. It needs to be about taking ownership and responsibility. So, anyway.
Perfect.